Welcome back.
Oh,
I don't have very many two-time guests, so this is a big honor for you. I feel like,
wow.
and for me, I get your time twice. It's very exciting.
I do feel very special. Thanks for having me, Abby.
You made so many good points after we spoke last time that we outlined a lot of the problems, but not necessarily all of the solutions. And especially as it relates to women's libido, this is an extremely important piece of the conversation. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad you're back to talk about this. How do you figure out if there's something off in someone's libido?
Yeah. I think in terms of libido, so much of it really has to do with, you know, elements of what's going on in our life, of course, right? So for a lot of people, they're coming to me when they've had a baby, they're, changing jobs, they're going through perimenopause, there's so many things that are kind of happening with them. And then the outcome or one of the outcomes that they tend to see is, oh gosh, also now I no longer want to have sex. Which, of course, that is Pandora's box, and
Yes.
it's such a symptom of so many other things that are happening in our lives. And I think that for a lot of women, a lot of it really has to do with the fact that like we just have too many things on our plate.
Hmm.
So, in terms of, how I'm helping people to kind of break that down and think through their libido, you and I were talking about this earlier, where I like to look at it in terms of like brakes and accelerators, right? So, for men, their libido tends to be a little bit more simple than ours, where, for example, they see you naked and they're like, yes, let's do
Ready.
this,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Versus for us, we're thinking through, is the house clean? What's going on with the kids? How many things are on my work to-do list? We haven't booked that flight yet. All of the kind of to-do list and laundry list of things that we have. And that, unfortunately, for so many of us, really are breaks. Those are things that really dampen our libido. So one of the activities that I'll go through with patients is kind of trying to come up with like, what are the things that interfere with you wanting to have sex? And literally writing these all out so that, you can kind of go back with your partner and say, all right, when the house is really dirty, like that's a break for me. It's really hard for me to be excited about having sex when there's, mess around.
Clutter. Yes. Clutter, whatever.
Totally.
Right.
Or for a lot of women, fatigue is one of them, right? Like you get to the end of the night, the kids are in bed, and you're like, the last thing I want to do is have sex and get naked. Like
Hmm.
I want to go get in my bed and fall asleep.
Yes.
And so, sort of thinking through like, okay, well, what are some of the ways that we can just peel off, one by one, these breaks. And then on the flip side of that, we like to look at the accelerators, right? So, one of the activities that we'll go through is we'll talk about like think about a time in your life when sex was really good, or even a time within the last 6 months that you had sex with your partner and it was, really wonderful. And I will tell you a lot of times it's like, oh, well, when we were on vacation and the children weren't there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, of course.
Where a lot of these distractions and
Hmm.
the things that are in our lives that are dampening our libido are erased. Um, but thinking through like what is it about your partner that attracts you to them? What are things that they do that make you feel more connected to them? So that you really are looking at big picture, like how do I better change this balance where I'm trying to incorporate more of these accelerators and trying to dampen some of the brakes. And like I alluded to from the beginning, I think that for a lot of people it's about the fact that we're just doing too much.
Yeah.
We have too many things on our plate, and unfortunately that is going to impact your libido. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I don't know how we fix that. You know?
totally,
I mean,
right? Well,
truly.
no, and I think that that's like a bigger point of what it's like to be a woman in society and a mom and a person with a career and all of the stuff that we're trying to accomplish. It
Yeah.
is really a
Yeah.
lot.
I mean, and physical clutter. I mean, I can speak personally for me. Clutter in my home makes my whole body feel cluttered. So I
100%.
can't do, there's so much I can't do. And then it also feels exhausting to attempt to remedy that, right? So then I'm like purely exhausted. So then that's the next thing I need to worry about is like, when can I catch up on my sleep? So it's a very crazy
Absolutely.
cycle.
It is a crazy cycle. And it's interesting that you say that. One of the things that I also talk to patients about, and I like really, really love this tip, is I talk about scheduled sex, which sounds very unsexy, right? This idea of like, we're going to look at the calendar and plan out when it is that we're going to have sex,
Hmm.
which, again, I know that for some people, they hear that phrase scheduled sex and they're like, ugh, that just sounds awful. Why would I want to do that? But when I explain it, really what I'm trying to say is you're looking again back at these brakes and the accelerators, and you're trying to think about like, is there a time that I am going to be actually in sort of the best mood for sex? So with the fatigue piece, let's say, for a lot of women, once their kids are in bed and at the end of the day, like that's just not ever going to be a time that they're going to be able to be aroused and be like into having sex. And so, thinking about like, is there a time midday when the kids are at school? Can you have sex in the morning? Like things like that, even just in thinking through the timing, that I think can be really helpful. So I think that piece is really great. And then the other thing that I think is really great about scheduled sex is it really starts the conversation of, I don't really want to have sex at all. My partner wants to have sex, every other day if possible, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. What is that kind of balance in between my desires and their desires, and how can we kind of come to a happy medium on it? And especially for patients, I have women in my office who are like, I haven't had sex in 6 months because I don't want to do it, for a number of reasons, of course. But to go from that to, okay, well, you want to have sex none, he wants to have sex clearly more than you're having it. What is a balance that you could kind of come up with? So, whether it's once a week or once a month or twice a month or, whatever it is, but it starts that conversation where it makes it so then your partner feels like you're making it a priority. You want to
Hmm.
have a conversation about it. You realize it's something that's important to your relationship. But then on the flip side, the benefit to the person who's not wanting to have sex as much is that then they're not feeling like, oh, tonight my partner's going to ask me and I'm going to have to turn them down again, so you don't have that kind of constant tension
Hmm.
of, how it's all going to go down because you've already determined like, nope, we've
This
already
is a
discussed
non-sex
this. We're
night.
not
This
making
is a right.
exactly. And that way you don't need to, be like stressed and have that tension associated with that.
Are there ways to improve libido? I mean, obviously, cleaning your house every day to your liking and making sure the kids are out, perfectly scheduled might be out of reach, but what are some of the things that might work?
Yeah, great question. Well, and like I said, to go back to this brakes and accelerator piece, of course, nothing is perfect, right? I fully realize that, and I think that most people do too. That like you're never going to be in a perfect space where everything is clean and your kids are perfectly behaved and they're not there and you're not tired and da 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 da. Da. But it really is about like moving the needle that direction. And I think that for a lot of people, that really does make a difference.
Mm.
The scheduled sex piece, I think that it really does help libido because it reminds the person that's less excited about sex when they do it, they're like, oh, actually, that was really fun. I liked that.
Mm.
Right. And so then you get this positive feedback of like, oh, okay. Like now we're having sex twice a month or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And now I'm enjoying it. I'm connected to my partner. I'm getting more positive feedback. We're not, at each other as much. And then that oftentimes I feel like will kind of snowball into your libido being a little bit more boosted. Does
Mm. I
that
feel
make sense?
like, yeah, for sure. I wonder why it is, and you might not have an answer, but I think so many times I hear like if I ever am talking about this with my girlfriends, I always hear like, once we're into it, it's fine, but the getting
Yep.
into it is so hard. And
Totally.
it's like we know that and we learn that behavior, and yet it's still hard to like we've reinforced that it's going to be a positive experience, and it's still
Right.
really hard for us to get into it, you know?
Yeah, totally. I
Crazy.
think that that's really fair. And, I wish that I had, I think we talked about actually on the last episode how there's Vyleesi and Addyi and, these medications that are sort of touted as like the Viagra for women or, like the fix. And I wish that that was the case, right?
Yeah.
Because that would just be so much easier. It
Yeah.
would.
Totally.
Um, but like I'm saying, I think that it's because this is such a complicated issue and that it's not just like oh, sure, slap a band-aid on it and everything's going to be fine, right? That you really
Right.
do have to kind of look at like big picture, what's happening with my psychology, what's happening with my, relationship with my partner. How is it that I am feeding and nurturing that in a way that is then going to lead me to want to have sex with that person?
Yeah. Um,
Um,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I do think that there is a hormonal piece for a lot of women, right? And this we like alluded to a little bit on the last episode too, where, for example, after somebody's had a baby and in pregnancy, their estrogen is really high, and then in the postpartum period, their estrogen is really low. Being in a state of low estrogen, which is something that happens to us as we enter menopause as well, like absolutely that can be associated with vaginal dryness, pain with sex, low libido, etc. And same thing with when our testosterone levels drop, which there's not as good of data in terms of like what happens with testosterone in the postpartum period, but there certainly is in perimenopause and
Mm-hmm.
menopause.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that that's another thing that if you're somebody listening to this episode and you're like, okay, I'm going to try all these things to, improve my relationship and peel things off my plate and blah, 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 blah. But that is another piece, of course, that you can talk to your doctor about is like, is there, a component of my hormones that's happening here? And, would going on hormone replacement make a difference for me or testosterone replacement or, et cetera, et cetera.
How does testosterone replacement work? Estrogen replacement, I think, is pretty clear.
Yep.
Um, but how does the testosterone piece work? Because I feel like we are very, especially because since we've last met, there the black box label has been taken off of, right, hormone
Yeah,
replacement therapy, all kinds of great stuff. Um,
totally.
and the estrogen piece, like we're all talking about, it makes sense. It's almost getting normalized.
Yeah.
The testosterone piece. I don't feel like people know when to ask for that piece. What should we
Yeah,
be looking for where we feel like we might want that supplementation? I take it. I think it's made a huge difference for me.
totally.
But I didn't, I took many years of estrogen replacement before I got to the
Before you got
testosterone.
there.
And it was like my
Absolutely.
idea with my doctor necessarily.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
My microphone. Okay, sorry. Sorry, my mic cut out for a second.
Yeah, no, no, no,
So
you're good.
yeah, so go ahead.
And I think that this is a really good point. I think you're right in that a lot of women are comfortable asking about estrogen, asking about hormone replacement. Testosterone, I think, is starting to have a moment. I feel like there's a lot more coming out about the benefits of testosterone. You're seeing a lot more of it on social media, podcasts, etc. I would say, from my perspective, I consider testosterone almost like the icing on the cake of somebody going through perimenopause or hormone replacement treatment. So, meaning you still, it's not the main hormone that you are replacing, right? So, the majority of symptoms that people have in perimenopause, menopause, for example, for the most part are coming from low estrogen. So, the primary thing that you're doing is replacing the estrogen. Some symptoms do come from progesterone. So replacing the progesterone is important. And when in somebody who has a uterus, we really do need to give them progesterone and estrogen together as a way to protect their uterus. So that's why those are often paired. But if you were somebody who had a hysterectomy, you could just be replaced with estrogen. So those are the things that we typically start with. And then on top of that, if somebody's like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good, I'm not having hot flashes, my mood feels more stable, my hair isn't falling out anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm still either their complaint will be my libido still kind of sucks, or I just still feel a little like fatigued and not myself. I would say those are the two main things that make me as a clinician think maybe we need to replace your testosterone.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any piece of this conversation we haven't covered? Because I feel like I want to be as thorough as I can, but this was an extremely helpful addendum.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and
Totally.
I know what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
I know there's all these medications, right? And they're not foolproof and we don't use them, but why there are like alcohol, THC, like there are things that are social lubricants in some way
Yep.
that can be very helpful for people in this arena too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you discuss that with patients? How do you figure out what your perfect level is?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I guess I would say my strategy is going through all the things that we have already talked about on this episode. And then on top of that, if patients are asking me about like, hey, I've used CBD for other things, like, do you think that's something that I could incorporate? Absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm very open to that with patients. I think that there's so many interesting products. I've had patients who use CBD suppositories, especially for my patients with like vaginal pain, and
Yep.
that can make a huge difference. I've had patients that have used CBD lube and have found, some good success with it. So I have no issue with patients kind of exploring and experimenting with that. I've personally found, just in terms of all the patients I've gone through with this, that it's not like a one size fits all approach, right?
Mhm.
That it really is individualized. Some people respond great to CBD products, some people not so much.
Sure.
And so I think it is a little bit of trial and error there, but that's certainly something that you can, consider and try to incorporate. And I mean, at least here in California, right, like pot shops have become so much more of like a social accepted norm
Yes,
for
yes.
their,
They're like literally on every corner now,
yes,
you
I
know,
have one down the street from my
as
house.
do I. Yes.
Totally.
And I feel like some of them are marketed as, right? They each have strains that are like, stay up all night strain, fall asleep early strain, have the best sex strain, don't have
Yeah,
sex for a month strain, right? Like, so
right.
there are some
Yeah.
that are targeted for this particular, hormone reason, which I think can maybe be helpful for people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then to circle back to your question about the alcohol piece, I think for a lot of people, I've certainly had patients come in and say, I have no problem having sex with my husband if I have like 2 or 3 glasses of wine,
Mhm.
but I don't want to have to rely on that. Like it makes
Right.
me feel like there's a bigger issue. And
Mhm.
I agree with that, right?
Mhm.
Like
Right.
yes, I understand that, but also I think that especially if you're coming to my office and you're talking about this as a problem, like
Yeah.
it's clearly there's something else going on there, right? And
Right.
that we do need to explore what are the other things that we can improve and tweaks that we can make in terms of your overall health in your life so that you're not just relying on alcohol.
Right.
And I mean, additionally, I would say I feel like there's so many more things coming out regarding alcohol and perimenopause and how it's just really not that great for us and increases our risk of breast cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
That I'm certainly not telling people like don't drink at all, but I do think it's something to explore.
Yeah. I mean, the 2 to 3 glasses of wine makes you not care that your house is a mess. So that's the,
Fair.
right? That's the very added benefit, I think. That's like the best benefit when you need it for that reason. So
Yeah,
I get it.
absolutely. Yeah,
Well, thank you
absolutely.
again for coming on. And
Of
if
course.
anything major in the world changes in the OB-GYN world, we'll do another episode.
I love it.
Why
That's
not?
wonderful. Well, thanks again for having me. I really hope that this was helpful. I really
Yes.
wanted your, listeners to have some concrete things that they can try and ask their providers, moving forward. So I
Very
hope that this
smart.
is helpful.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, of course.